Welcome back to the Lorelord. Today we're diving into the latest wave of Warhammer 40k pre-orders from Games Workshop. And we're not just looking at miniatures, we're exploring the rich lore behind each of these units. From the exemplary Sons of Ultramar to the damned Servants of Chaos. From ancient Xenos Raiders to revolutionary Gretchin. This pre-order wave tells stories of heroism, corruption, and the eternal struggle that defines the 41st millennium. So let's break down the lore behind each of these releases and understand what makes these warriors, monsters, and machines so important to the Warhammer 40k universe. Combat Patrol Ultramarines. The Combat Patrol box represents the quintessential Ultramarine strike force, the tactical backbone of the most celebrated Space Marine chapter in the entire Imperium. But to understand why this matters, we need to talk about what makes the Ultramarines so significant. The Ultramarines are the 13th Legion, sons of the Primarch Reboot Guilliman, and they are the template by which all other Space Marine chapters are measured. When the Emperor created the Space Marines, he envisioned 20 legions of transhuman warriors, each led by a genetically engineered demigod Primarch. The Ultramarines became the largest and most successful of these legions, not through raw aggression or psychic might, but through discipline, adaptability, and tactical excellence. After the catastrophic Horus Heresy tore the Imperium apart, it was Reboot Guilliman who reorganized the shattered Space Marine legions. He wrote the Codex Astartes, the sacred tome that defined Space Marine organization, tactics, and doctrine. The Ultramarines embody this codex perfectly, representing the ideal balance of flexibility and structure. A combat patrol is more than just a squad of warriors. It's a perfectly balanced force capable of operating independently in diverse combat scenarios. These units can conduct reconnaissance, strike critical targets, hold defensive positions, or spearhead assaults. The Ultramarines excel at this kind of warfare because they've spent 10,000 years perfecting combined arms tactics. When you see an Ultramarines combat patrol deploy, you're witnessing the result of millennia of institutional knowledge. Every movement is calculated, every firing solution optimized, every tactical decision made with reference to the Codex Astartes. They're not just Space Marines, they're the Space Marines, the standard of excellence that the rest of the Imperium's defenders aspire to reach. The realm of Ultramar, the Ultramarines' home territory, stands as a beacon of order and civilization in a galaxy consumed by darkness. While most Imperial worlds are hellish factory planets, feudal death worlds, or hive cities drowning in pollution and despair, Ultramar represents what the Imperium could be. Well-governed, prosperous, and defended by warriors who see themselves as protectors rather than conquerors. Ultramarines Upgrades and Transfers. The iconography and heraldry of the Ultramarines isn't merely aesthetic. It's a visual language that tells the story of a chapter's 10,000-year crusade to defend humanity. Every symbol matters. The Ultima, the iconic inverted Omega symbol, represents both the chapter's numerical designation, the 13th, and their status as the ultimate example of what Space Marines should be. The laurels that adorn their armor are direct callbacks to ancient Rome, the civilization that Guilliman modeled Ultramar upon. These aren't just decorative. They signify battle honors, campaign victories, and centuries of service. When an Ultramarine bears these markings, he carries the weight of his chapter's history. The skulls represent remembrance of fallen brothers. The purity seals contain scripture and oaths written by chaplains. The company's markings denote not just organizational placement, but brotherhood with legendary warriors who wore the same colors centuries ago. The Roman aesthetic of the Ultramarines is deeply intentional. Guilliman, before being rediscovered by the Emperor, was raised on the world of Macragge, where he absorbed the lessons of ancient Terran history. He saw in Rome's legions a model of disciplined warfare, civic virtue, and the idea that warriors could also be builders and governors. The Ultramarines don't just conquer, they civilize, bringing order to anarchic worlds and defending them with unwavering dedication. These upgrade kits transform generic Space Marines into proud sons of Macragge, warriors who don't just fight for the Emperor but carry forward the dream of what the Imperium could be if it embraced reason, order, and strategic excellence. Victrix Honour Guard. The Victrix Honour Guard represent the absolute pinnacle of Ultramarine martial excellence. these aren't just veteran warriors, they're living legends, each one a hero whose deeds would fill entire volumes in the chapter's archives. When Reboot Guilliman fell into stasis 10,000 years ago, mortally wounded by the demon Primarch Fulgrim, the Ultramarines lost their guiding light. For 100 centuries they fought on in his name, following his codex, trying to live up to his impossible standard. When he finally returned in the dark days of the 41st millennium, awakened by the machinations of Archmagos Belisarius' call and the intervention of the Eldari, it was a miracle that shook the galaxy. The Victrix Honour Guard were formed specifically to protect the returned Primarch. But Guilliman doesn't choose just any warriors for this duty. To stand among the Victrix Honour Guard, a Space Marine must have performed deeds of such extraordinary valor that their names are inscribed in the Fortress of Hera's most sacred halls. These warriors fight with weapons that are masterworks of the Artificer's art, power swords that can cleave through tank armor, shields that can deflect crack missiles, armor that has been blessed by the Chapter Master of Sanctity and reinforced with the finest materials the Imperium can provide. But more than their equipment, it's their skill that sets them apart. The Victrix Honour Guard fight with a synchronization that borders on supernatural. They've trained together for so long, fought in so many desperate battles, that they can predict each other's movements instinctively. They move as extensions of Guilliman's tactical genius, executing complex maneuvers without need for verbal commands. But perhaps most importantly, they serve as a reminder to Guilliman himself. When the Primarch looks upon these warriors, he sees what his sons have become in his absence. Not the naive idealists he once led, but hardened veterans who spent 10,000 years fighting in the Long War. They ground him, remind him that while he may be a demigod, returned from myth, his sons are the ones who held the line while he slept. Cato Sicarius. Cato Sicarius, former captain of the Ultramarines 2nd Company and now commander of the Victrix Honour Guard, is a name that inspires fierce debate among fans and in-universe characters alike. The Master of the Watch, Knight Champion of Macragge, Grand Duke of Talisar, High Suzerain of Ultramar, and bearer of more titles than most warriors earn in 10 lifetimes. Sicarius embodies a fascinating contradiction at the heart of the Ultramarines culture. His combat record is genuinely impeccable. He's slain orc war bosses in single combat, held the line against Tyranid swarms, defeated Chaos champions and led his company to victory in hundreds of engagements. His strategic mind is sharp, his adherence to the Codex Astartes beyond reproach, and his personal courage absolutely unquestionable. Yet he's also ambitious to the point of arrogance, prideful, and so focused on glory that he's made rivals throughout the chapter. Before Guilliman's return, Sicarius was widely considered the heir apparent to Chapter Master Calgar, and he knew it. This knowledge colored his actions, sometimes leading him to take unnecessary risks in pursuit of greater glory. The relationship between Sicarius and Calgar is complex. Calgar recognizes Sicarius' brilliance, but also his flaws. He's both groomed Sicarius for greater command and held him back when his pride threatens to endanger his brothers. It's a mentorship born of necessity. Calgar knows that Sicarius has a potential to be one of the greatest chapter masters in Ultramarine history, but only if he can learn humility. Guilliman's return changed everything for Sicarius. Suddenly, the position he'd been grooming himself for was irrelevant. The Primarch himself had returned to lead the chapter, and had chosen Cato to lead his personal bodyguard. For a warrior defined by ambition, this could have been devastating, but it also provided an opportunity for growth. Sicarius' journey took a dramatic turn when he was lost in the warp, trapped in the Eye of Terror fighting for survival against the demonic legions of chaos. When he finally escaped, he was changed, tempered by experience, humbled by suffering, and more focused on duty than glory. He emerged not as the brash glory seeker of his youth, but as a warrior who had stared into the abyss and returned with hard-won wisdom. I'll be doing a complete dive on Cato Sicarius in an upcoming video, exploring his full character arc, his greatest victories, his failures, and what makes him such a polarizing yet fascinating figure in Ultramarine lore. Marneus Calgar, an armor of Antilocus. Lord Macragge, the Master of Ultramar, the Lord Defender of Greater Ultramar. Chapter Master Marneus Augustus Calgar is one of the Imperium's greatest living heroes, a warrior king who's held the line during the darkest centuries of the 41st millennium. Calgar's story is one of evolution and transformation, both literal and metaphorical. He rose to become a chapter master through merit and valor, leading the Ultramarines through crisis after crisis. But his defining moment came during the First Tyrannic War, when High Fleet Behemoth descended upon Macragge. The Tyranids represent an existential threat unlike anything else in the galaxy. An extragalactic swarm of bioengineered organisms that devour entire worlds, consuming all biomass and leaving barren rocks in their wake. When Behemoth reached Ultramar, it was the first time the Imperium had faced such a threat, and the Ultramarines bore the brunt of the invasion. Calgar led the defense personally, and in a battle that has become legendary, he faced the Swarmlord, the ultimate expression of Tyranid evolution, a creature of terrifying intelligence and combat prowess. In brutal melee combat, the Swarmlord gravely wounded Calgar. Only the heroic sacrifice of his honor guard, led by brother Aloysius, allowed Calgar to escape with his life. He was evacuated to orbit, his body broken, barely clinging to life. Lesser warriors would have died. Calgar was rebuilt with extensive bionics, losing much of his original body but gaining a second chance at service. He emerged from his resurrection even more formidable, his mind sharpened by his brush with death, his resolve unbreakable. The armor of Antilochus represents Calgar in his most tactically flexible configuration. Unlike the Terminator armor he's famous for wearing, the gauntlets of Ultramar. This lighter artificer plate allows him greater mobility and speed. It's a symbol of his adaptability, his willingness to choose the right tool for each mission rather than relying solely on overwhelming force. When Reboot Guilliman returned, many wondered how Calgar would react. Here was the Primarch returned from 10,000 years of stasis, ready to lead the chapter once more. For a lesser man, this might have been a crisis, a sudden obsolescence after centuries of supreme command. But Calgar welcomed his Primarch with humility and relief. This moment reveals the true measure of Calgar's character. He's not a glory seeker or power-hungry tyrant. He's a servant of the Imperium who bore the crushing weight of command because someone had to. When Guilliman returned, Calgar didn't resent the loss of authority. He was grateful that the chapter once again had its true leader. Calgar's transformation into Primaris Space Marine symbolizes his willingness to adapt for the good of the chapter. The Primaris process is dangerous, painful, and not guaranteed to succeed, especially for warriors of Calgar's age. But he underwent it anyway, emerging stronger and ready to serve as Primarch in this new age. Archon. Now we venture into the darkest corners of the galaxy, the Commorragh, the Dark City, the twisted realm of the Drukhari. The Drukhari, or Dark Eldar as the Imperium calls them, are the depraved remnants of a once great civilization. 10,000 years ago, the ancient Eldari Empire ruled much of the galaxy, a civilization of such power and sophistication that they considered themselves gods. But their hubris and excess birthed Slaanesh, the chaos god of pleasure and pain, whose awakening consumed their empire in a psychic cataclysm called the Fall. The Drukhari are the survivors who refused to give up their decadent ways. They fled into the Webway, creating Commorragh, a city dimension existing outside normal space. But they face a terrible curse. Slaanesh hungers for their souls, slowly draining their life force. Only by feeding on the suffering of others can they sustain themselves, stealing the pain and terror of their victims to keep Slaanesh's grip at bay. An Archon is the supreme ruler of a cabal, a pirate fleet of raiders who strike from the Webway without warning. To become an Archon requires surviving millennia of the most cutthroat politics imaginable. These beings are ancient beyond human comprehension, having lived for thousands of years through constant vigilance, ruthless elimination of rivals, and mastery of the brutal social dynamics of the Commorragh. Every Archon is a genius of cruelty, a master of psychological warfare, and a brilliant tactician. They command fleets of anti-gravity skimmers that can appear from nowhere, strike with devastating precision, and vanish with their prizes before the enemy can mount an effective defense. Their weapons are technological marvels, dark light weapons that unweave matter at the molecular level, agonizers that inflict pain beyond mortal comprehension, and shadowy fields that make them nearly impossible to target. But an Archon's true weapon is their mind. They've spent thousands of years studying alien species, learning their weaknesses, perfecting the art of the raid. They know exactly how to break a planet's defenses, which targets to strike to cause maximum terror, and how to harvest the greatest amount of suffering in the shortest time. The Archon represents the dark mirror of what immortality without morality creates, being so divorced from empathy that torture and slavery are simply tools of survival. They're not mindless monsters, they're hyper-intelligent predators who have turned cruelty into an art form, all in service of extending their cursed existence for one more day. Traitor Enforcer. The Traitor Enforcer represents one of the Imperium's darkest ironies, the fall of those who once upheld its law. The Adeptus Arbites are the Imperium's ultimate law enforcement, judge, jury, executioners who maintain order across a million worlds. They're not police in any recognizable sense. They're paramilitaries who enforce Imperial law with absolute brutality. Riots are met with mass executions, dissent is crushed with overwhelming force. The Arbites don't serve justice, they serve order, and they'll kill as many as necessary to maintain it. These warriors are trained from childhood in the Schola Progenium, indoctrinated with absolute loyalty to the Emperor and the Imperium. They're equipped with carapace armor that can stop heavy weapons fire, wielding shotguns, shock mauls, and executioner weapons designed for urban warfare. They know every dirty trick of crowd control, interrogation, and suppression. So when an Arbites falls to chaos, the result is particularly horrifying. These aren't ignorant cultists or desperate rebels. They're trained professionals who understand Imperial doctrine inside and out, who know exactly how to exploit the weaknesses of the systems they once defended. Traitor Enforcers bring their expertise to chaos warbands with devastating effect. They know how to turn populations against their own government, how to spread terror through systematic oppression, how to identify and eliminate local leadership. They understand the rhythms of Imperial law enforcement and can predict responses, ambush relief forces, and sabotage defenses before attacks even begin. What drives an Arbites to fall? Sometimes it's gradual corruption, exposure to forbidden knowledge during investigations, whispers from confiscated heretical texts, or simply witnessing so much horror that faith breaks. Other times it's betrayal, an Arbites who watches their superiors sacrifice innocent populations for political gain, who sees the hypocrisy at the heart of Imperial justice. The Traitor Enforcer is a warning. Even the Imperium's most incorruptible institutions can fall. When those who enforce the law become the lawless, they're even more dangerous than ordinary heretics because they know exactly how to break the systems they once protected. Legionnaires. The Traitor Legionnaires, Chaos Space Marines, fallen angels who once swore to protect humanity and now fight to destroy it. 10,000 years ago, the galaxy burned. The Horus Heresy saw half of the Emperor's Space Marine legions turn traitor, led by the War Master Horus himself. Brother fought brother in a civil war that nearly destroyed the Imperium. When the Loyalists finally won, the traitor legions fled into the Eye of Terror, a massive warp rift where reality itself breaks down. The Legionaries you see today are the inheritors of that ancient betrayal. Some are original traitors, veterans who personally fought in the heresy itself. Time flows strangely in the Eye of Terror. What seems like decades can be centuries of subjective experience. These ancient warriors have been fighting the long war for what feels like eons, their minds and bodies warped by constant exposure to chaos. Others are newer recruits, Space Marines from Loyalist chapters who fell to corruption, or humans transformed through dark rituals and implantation of corrupted gene seed. The Traitor Legions are always recruiting, always seeking new warriors to replace those lost in their eternal crusade. What makes Chaos Space Marines so dangerous is that they combine the superhuman abilities of the Adeptus Astartes with the reality-warping power of chaos. They bear the marks of their dark patrons, plague-ridden bodies swollen with Nurgle's gifts, flesh writhing with Tzeentchian mutation, minds consumed by Khornate bloodlust, or bodies perfected into horrific beauty by Slaanesh's touch. But they haven't lost their tactical brilliance. Many legionaries maintain the discipline and strategic thinking of their founding legions. The Word-bearers still fight with religious fervor and coordinated doctrine. The Iron Warriors remain siege masters. The Alpha Legion continues its shadowy manipulations. They're not mindless berserkers. Well, the Khornate ones are. They're transhuman warriors with 10,000 years of experience twisted by the power of gods. The Legionaries represent the Imperium's greatest failure and its eternal enemy. They're proof that even the Emperor's finest creations can fall, that corruption can take root in even the most loyal hearts. They fight the long war not for conquest but for vengeance, to tear down everything the Emperor built and prove that his dream of a unified humanity was always doomed to fail. Traitor Guardsman Squad. If the Traitor Legionaries are fallen angels, the Traitor Guardsmen are fallen men, and perhaps that makes their tragedy even more profound. The Imperial Guard is humanity's hammer, billions upon billions of ordinary humans armed with faith, las guns, and courage. They're not superhumans or genetically engineered warriors. They're regular people, conscripted from countless worlds, thrown into battles that would break the minds of anyone from our time. They die by the millions, holding the line against horrors that would drive them mad just to look upon. The Imperial Guard soldier's life is one of unimaginable brutality. They're shipped across the galaxy in cramped troop ships, often arriving decades after they left home due to warp travel's time-distorting effects. They fight on worlds where the air is toxic, the gravity crushing, the temperatures lethal. They face enemies that can tear them apart with bare hands, weapons that vaporize them instantly, or psychic powers that can explode their minds. And through it all, they're expected to maintain absolute faith in the Emperor and unwavering loyalty to commanders who often view them as expendable ammunition. So what happens when the faith breaks? Traitor Guardsmen fall for countless reasons. Sometimes it's gradual, exposure to chaos, corruption, whispers in the dark, promises of power, or simply survival. Sometimes it's sudden, a world falls to chaos invasion and the choice is to serve or die. Sometimes it's despair, a soldier watches their entire regiment sacrificed for a meaningless objective by commanders who never cared about their lives. Some fall willingly, embracing chaos as liberation from the Imperium's grinding oppression. Others fall reluctantly, broken by trauma and horror, seeking anything that will make the pain stop. Many don't even understand what they've become until it's too late. Traitor Guard fight with a desperation that loyalist forces often lack. They know that there's no redemption, no forgiveness, no peaceful retirement. They're damned souls fighting for dark masters, often augmented with crude chaos blessings, extra limbs, diseased resilience, and narcotic-fueled rage that lets them ignore wounds that would drop a normal human. They represent the Imperium's darkest truth, that its own cruelty creates its enemies. Every Traitor Guardsman was once a loyal soldier of the Emperor. Their fall is testimony to the failure of the Imperial system, that when you treat humans as expendable resources, some will eventually seek any alternative, even damnation. The Red Gobbo's Tin Boy. And now for something completely different, the glorious insanity of orc culture. In the grimdark far future where there is only war, the orcs are having the time of their lives. While humanity drowns in misery and alien races fight for survival, the orcs are living their best life, because for orcs, war is life, and the 41st millennium is an all-you-can-fight buffet. But within orc society exists a brutal hierarchy. At the top are the massive war bosses, the biggest and strongest orcs who rule through violence and charisma, and at the very bottom are the Gretchin, small, weak, cowardly greenskins who serve as slaves, cannon fodder, and convenient objects for orc frustration. Enter the Red Gobbo, the legendary Gretchin revolutionary. The Red Gobbo is unique in orc society because he looked at the brutal hierarchy and said, "What if we didn't?" He's a grot with ambition, with ideas, with the vision of Gretchin liberation. He's essentially a tiny communist revolutionary operating in the most aggressively capitalist, in the might makes right sense, society imaginable. The Tin Boy is his mobile propaganda platform and weapon of war, a ramshackle mech suit cobbled together from scrap metal, stolen Imperial tech, orc gubbins, and what appears to be several tons of red paint, because the red ones go faster, as every orc knows. By any rational standard, the Tin Boy should not work. It's held together with bolts, prayers, and what might be actual belief made manifest. The weapons are mismatched, the armor has gaps that you could throw a grot through, and orcs probably have, and the whole thing looks like it might fall apart if you sneeze on it. But this is the orcs we're talking about. Orcs have a latent psychic field that makes their beliefs reality. If enough orcs, or grots, believe something works, it works. Red things go faster not because of aerodynamics, but because orcs believe they do. Daka shoots harder when there's more of it because orcs believe more is better. The Red Gobbo has somehow managed to convince enough Gretchin that his revolution is real, that his tin boy is powerful, that liberation is possible. And in the weird psychic reality of orc belief, that's enough to make it true. The Red Gobbo represents something unique in 40k. Humor, yes, but also hope in the form of the underdog revolution. He's proof that even in the darkest galaxy imaginable, even the smallest and most downtrodden creatures can rise up and make their mark, usually in the form of explosions and accidental victories. Space Marines Battle Force, Crux Terminatus. Finally, we come to the Crux Terminatus Battle Force, representing one of the most elite and feared configurations in all of Space Marine warfare. Tactical Dreadnought armor, universally known as Terminator armor, is the ultimate expression of Space Marine might. These suits are relics from the dark age of technology, ancient even by the Imperium standards. The secrets of their construction are only partially understood, making each suit irreplaceable. When a Terminator falls, recovering his armor is as important as recovering his gene seed. The armor itself is a marvel, layered ceramite plates thick enough to shrug off las cannon fire, power systems that can sustain a warrior in the vacuum of space or the depths of an ocean, and servos powerful enough to wield weapons that would require a crew to operate normally. A Space Marine in Terminator armor becomes a walking tank, capable of advancing through fire that would vaporize entire squads of normal infantry. But the Crux Terminatus, the symbol worn on Terminator armor, carries special significance. According to chapter legend, each crux contains a fragment of the Emperor's own armor from his battle with Horus aboard the Vengeful Spirit. Whether this is literally true or symbolic doesn't matter. The crux represents a direct connection to the Emperor himself, a tangible link to the Imperium's founding moment. Only the First Company veterans earn the right to wear Terminator armor. These are warriors who have served for centuries, who have proven themselves in the most brutal campaigns, who embody everything their chapters stand for. They're not just skilled fighters, they're living legends, each one a hero whose deeds are recorded in the chapter's most sacred texts. Terminators excel in the most dangerous missions imaginable. They teleport directly into space hulks, ancient ships fused together and infested with horrors. They assault demon worlds where reality itself is hostile. They hold breaches against tyrannid swarms, standing immovable while lesser warriors would be swept away. They deploy to the most critical objectives, knowing that failure means not just death, but the potential doom of entire worlds. The Crux Terminatus Battle Force represents a complete strike force of these elite warriors, enough Terminators to spearhead an assault, hold a critical position, or break the back of an enemy army. It's a kind of force that chapter masters deploy when victory is absolutely essential, and acceptable losses are measured in these irreplaceable veterans. This wave of pre-orders represents the full spectrum of Warhammer 40k storytelling, from the noble Ultramarines carrying forward their Primarch's vision of order and excellence, to the tragic fall of Imperial servants turned to chaos, from ancient Xenos raiders sustained by cruelty to revolutionary Gretchin fighting against the impossible odds. Each miniature tells a story. The Ultramarines embody the Imperium's ideals, what humanity could be if it embraced reason and order. The Traitor Forces show what happens when faith breaks, when corruption takes root, when the Imperium's own darkness creates its enemies. The Archon represents the dying gasp of a once great civilization that chose damnation over extinction. And the Red Gobbo reminds us that even in the grim darkness of the far future, there's room for absurdity and the triumph of the underdog. Whether you're collecting these for your army, painting them for display, or just appreciating the lore, remember that each of these warriors, monsters, and machines carries 10,000 years of history. They're not just game pieces, they're characters in the greatest story ever told about a galaxy at war. Thank you for watching the Lorelord.